Morning, everyone. Bon matin tout le monde. Merci pour rejoindre nous pour cette mise à
Thank you for
jour
joining us
au compte du Canada à la
for
situation
this
en Afghanistan.
new
Thank
day.
you for joining us for this important update on Canada's response to the situation in Afghanistan. On va commencer avec quelques mots de l'honorable Marco Mendicino, ministre de l'Immigration, des Réfugiés et de la Citoyenneté. We'll start with a few words from the Honorable Marco Mendicino, Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Over to you, Minister.
Good morning. Bonjour. I'm joining you from the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit and Haudenosaunee, along with my colleague, Minister Marco. Thank you for joining us today for another important update on the situation in Afghanistan. As we saw yesterday, the coalition completed its withdrawal from Afghanistan. This marked the conclusion of an historic military evacuation, but not the end of our efforts to support the people of Afghanistan, and especially those who are availing themselves of the humanitarian pathways that we have created for those Afghan refugees who are hoping for a better life in Canada. Le Canada demeure déterminé à ramener le plus d'Afghans vulnérables possible en sécurité au Canada. Nous sommes solidaires avec eux et nous continuons de travailler pour les aider à commencer une nouvelle vie au Canada. During our last update, I set out the concrete actions we are taking right now to support the people of Afghanistan. First, we evacuated roughly 3,700 people through a military operation that was carried out in exemplary fashion by the members of our Canadian Armed Forces. Second, we are continuing to work with the United States, as well as other allies and partners in the region, to generate additional evacuation capacity through the establishment of air bridges and, most importantly, by taking a unified stance on the right of safe passage for Afghan nationals seeking to resettle to Canada. And I will come back to this in a moment. Third, Canada is leading the world through the launch and implementation of a humanitarian resettlement program for those forced to flee Afghanistan, which focuses on women, girls, human rights defenders, targeted religious minorities like the Sikhs, Hindus, and Hazaras, and other vulnerable populations. Fourth, my department has mobilized our entire global network to make this operation our number one priority. We are further accelerating processing, issuing emergency visas that remain valid, issuing further documentation with language that is strong and clear to protect and assist Afghan refugees traveling to Canada, have set up a hotline with extended hours. We are providing financial relief, and we are staying in frequent contact with those who have applied to our programs, providing them with as much guidance and support as we can. Together, these actions are making a difference. We are seeing Afghan refugees and their families safely arriving in Canada, completing their quarantines, and putting down roots in their new communities. And this is good. We are literally working around the clock to save lives, but we know there is more to do. With Allied evacuation operations ending, we're moving to the next phase of our efforts. The past week has created much anxiety and uncertainty for Afghans about their future, and we're going to do everything that we can to help. Today, I want to focus on how we are continuing to work with our allies and international partners to ensure that we are able to continue welcoming Afghan refugees safely in Canada. As part of this effort, I'm pleased to announce an agreement with the United States to cooperate on the safe passage of Afghan nationals out of Afghanistan. This is a critically important step in our strategy. As refugees who supported our efforts look to move to surrounding countries, we will work in close partnership to support. As part of this agreement, Canada will welcome 5,000 refugees evacuated by the United States. Aujourd'hui, j'ai le plaisir d'annoncer que le gouvernement du Canada a conclu une entente avec les États-Unis pour réinstaller jusqu'à 5,000 réfugiés afghans. These refugees will be accepted as part of Canada's recently announced humanitarian resettlement. The partnership will also help to reduce current pressures in transit areas that are currently hosting thousands of refugees. It means that more Afghan refugees find safety in our country and that Canada will continue fulfilling our promise to offer them refuge. This reflects our shared commitment to provide protection to those who need it. Grâce à les efforts incroyables, les forces ont pu aider à évacuer des guerres afghanes. Le Canada est très heureux de coopérer avec eux pour réinstaller certains de ces réfugiés au Canada. In addition to the joint Canada-US agreement to resettle Afghan refugees, we're also working with our Five Eyes allies. I remain in frequent contact with my counterparts, as do my colleagues, and have recently joined with them from Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and the United States to discuss the challenges ahead and how we are going to address them together. As part of these discussions, we raised the importance of safe passage for Afghans who wish to leave the country and all that we need to do to speak with one voice on this important matter. And the others agreed. And thanks to a coalition-led effort, those voices have now been joined by some 100 countries. And those voices are being heard. Over the weekend, Canada and its allies received assurances from the Taliban that Afghan citizens with travel authorization from other countries would be allowed to safely leave Afghanistan. We have a clear commitment from the Taliban, and we are going to hold them to it. It goes without saying that things remain extremely volatile, and we take nothing for granted. Si une personne qualifiée dans le cadre de nos programmes a besoin de documents de voyage pour quitter l'Afghanistan ou tout autre pays, nous l'exhortons à contacter IRCC via notre ligne téléphonique ou par courriel électronique, où nous continuons de fournir les informations les plus récentes. We recognize that people need our help and that they have questions. And on that note, I want to share that IRCC has now answered more than 9,000 calls and 46,000 emails through our dedicated channels. We continue to work around the clock to answer all calls and emails and to continue processing Afghan files. We've made significant progress, and we're not going to stop. Over the course of the past week, hundreds of Afghans are planning to come to Canada, have safely made their way to third countries. Several flights from these countries have now touched down here at home, and we expect more in the coming days from various countries. To everyone who applied under our special immigration measures, I want to assure you that your application is being processed, and once approved, your visa will remain valid. For those who applied through our other immigration measures, such as family sponsorship or protected persons in Canada with dependent overseas, know that we are also prioritizing your cases too, and that work continues. You continue to remain eligible, whether you remain in Afghanistan or whether you have made your way to another country. Pour ceux qui sont arrivés au Canada en toute sécurité, plus de 450 Afghans ont terminé leur quarantaine et ont été accueillis dans leur nouveau foyer parmi 14 communautés différentes à travers le Canada. Comme toujours, les réfugiés continueront d'être jumelés à des communautés où un soutien et l'établissement est déjà en place, où ils sont de la famille et où des écoles, des logements et une formation linguistique sont facilement disponibles. We are continuing to work closely with our provincial and territorial partners, as well as municipalities and resettlement and service agencies across the country to support Afghan refugees and to welcome them into their new communities. I often like to say that one of the key ingredients to our success in our settlement service and immigration system is that it is the people who are working on our front lines in our settlement service organizations and Canadians themselves who are stepping up. Immediately upon arrival, these organizations meet refugees who often arrive with very little, give them essentials like food and clothing, infant supplies, toys, and games for their children. They also provide temporary housing and are helping to find a permanent place to live. As they settle into their new homes and communities, refugees feel the love and support of an entire nation. The outpouring of support from individuals to groups to corporate Canada has been absolutely phenomenal. Veterans have also stepped up, and we know that they were among the first out of the gate when they pledged to cover the cost of retraining interpreters who are looking for jobs here in Canada, including in the tech sector. The Airbnb is offering free temporary housing for up to 20,000 Afghan refugees worldwide, and thousands of those will be here in Canada. WestJet is giving our resettlement efforts wings, helping people to land in communities across Canada and looking to see how else they can help. People like Walmart and Rogers are also coming forward to lend a hand, and we'll look forward to celebrate all of their contributions in the days and weeks ahead. Increasingly, it feels, and I'm knowing that the business sector is stepping up and is getting competitive even among their own community with their compassion. And what could be more Canadian than that? Nous sommes tous incroyablement reconnaissants pour l'enthousiasme et le soutien que nous continuons de recevoir des Canadiens de partout au pays qui veulent aider. Tous les Canadiens qui souhaitent donner de leur temps ou de leur argent pour aider ces réfugiés à s'installer au Canada sont invités à communiquer avec un organisme fournisseur de services dans votre région ou à visiter le site web d'RCC pour plus de renseignements. On a final note, I'd like to reiterate that we're pulling out all the stops to help as many Afghans as possible who want to make their home in Canada. Again, this includes those who either want to leave Afghanistan or who have already arrived in a third country. These have been challenging times, and I want to take a moment to thank all of those who've been involved in this great national undertaking, beginning with my own department who are working around the clock, as well as all public servants in our government, and indeed everyone across civil society, in the private sector, and all Canadians who are stepping up. Nous ne nous arrêterons pas tant que ce travail important ne sera pas terminé, and we aren't going to stop until we get this job done. Thank you. Merci.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Je passerai la parole maintenant à l'honorable Marc Arnaud, ministre des Affaires étrangères. Over now to the honorable Marc Arnaud, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you, Marco. Yesterday, the United States completed its withdrawal from Afghanistan, marking the end of 20 years of Western military presence in the country. However, our thoughts remain with those still in Afghanistan who fear retribution in what must certainly feel like an uncertain future. Before the U.S.-controlled air bridge closed, Canada evacuated around 3,700 people from Afghanistan, the vast majority of whom have now relocated in Canada. This does not mark the end of our efforts to bring those who are still in Afghanistan to safety. It simply means that we are entering a new phase of our operations. Let me be clear, we will not stop before we evacuate remaining Canadian citizens, permanent residents and their families, and the vulnerable Afghans who have supported our work in Afghanistan. Canada is determined to work with allies and neighboring countries to ensure safe passage to those who wish to leave Afghanistan and return home or seek a better life here. Just this weekend, Canada joined over 100 other countries in calling on the Taliban to allow foreign nationals, as well as vulnerable and at-risk Afghans who have official documentation to travel to another country, to leave Afghanistan. And yesterday, the United Nations Security Council added its voice by adopting a resolution that calls on the Taliban to allow the safe, secure, and orderly departure from Afghanistan of Afghans and all foreign nationals. This will be the first true test for the Taliban from the international community. We will judge them by their actions, not their words. Afghans with travel documents to other countries must be allowed to move safely and freely out of the country without interference. Canada and its allies are firm on this point, and we are united. The Taliban has committed to letting those people leave. Now it is time for them to follow through. Efforts to get Afghans and foreign nationals safely out of Afghanistan are front and center for the international community's efforts. This is a common purpose. But we also agree on the need to engage and support Afghanistan's neighbors. Hier, je me suis entretenu avec des collègues du G7,
I met with colleagues from the
de
G7,
l'Union européenne,
NATO,
du
the European
Qatar,
Union,
de la Turquie,
Qatar, and
pour
Turkey
discuter du passage
to discuss safe
sécuritaire des
passage for
réfugiés.
refugees.
Nous cherchons également des moyens de rouvrir
We are also
l'aéroport de
looking at
Kaboul
ways
dès
to
que la
reopen
sécurité
Kabul
pourra être
Airport
rétablie,
as soon as
ce qui
security
est
can be
nécessaire
restored,
tant pour
which
les
is necessary
évacuations
for
que
both
pour l'accès à l'aide
evacuations
humanitaire
and
dans ce pays
humanitarian
enclavé.
access in this landlocked
Je
country.
serai en contact avec
I
d'autres
will be
homologues
meeting with
dans la
other
journée
counterparts
et
later
dans les
today
jours à venir,
and in the coming days,
donc ceux des pays voisins de
including those from
l'Afghanistan.
Afghanistan's neighboring
Je les
countries.
remercie de leur soutien dans
I
l'accueil
thank them
des
for their
réfugiés
support in
et je
welcoming
m'engage à
refugees,
faciliter le voyage
and
au
I am
Canada pour
committed
les
to
personnes
facilitating travel
admissibles
to
à nos
Canada
mesures
for
spéciales
those who
d'immigration.
qualify for our special immigration
David
measures.
Sproul, le haut fonctionnaire du
David
Canada
Sproul,
pour l'Afghanistan,
Canada's
soutient
senior
ses
official for
efforts à Doha,
Afghanistan,
au
is
Qatar,
supporting these
où
efforts
plusieurs pays ont
in
déployé
Doha,
des
Qatar,
diplomates
where several
pour
countries have
définir
deployed
ensemble une
diplomats to
réponse
work together
internationale à la
to shape
crise
the
en
international
Afghanistan.
response to the crisis in
Il est là
Afghanistan.
pour partager le point de vue
He
du
is here
Canada,
today to share
non seulement
Canada's
sur le droit de
perspective, or he's
passage
there
en
rather
toute
to share
sécurité,
Canada's perspective,
mais aussi sur
not only on
d'autres
safe
enjeux,
passage but
comme
also
la
on other
sécurité
issues,
et
such
l'accès à
as
l'aide
security
humanitaire
and
et
access to
internationale.
humanitarian and international
La semaine
aid.
dernière, le Canada a
Last
augmenté de
week,
50
Canada
millions de dollars
increased its
son aide
humanitarian
humanitaire
assistance to
aux
the
Afghans
Afghans by
pour
$50
faciliter
million
l'approvisionnement en
in order to
nourriture,
facilitate the
en soins de
provision of
santé
food,
et en eau potable.
healthcare, and clean water.
Entre-temps, la situation
Meanwhile,
demeure
the situation
volatile.
remains volatile.
L'État islamique est toujours actif en
The Islamic
Afghanistan
State
et son
remains
intention est de
active
créer
in
un climat de
Afghanistan,
terreur
and
et
its intention
d'insécurité.
is to create a
En
climate
tant
of
que
terror
membre de
and
la
insecurity.
coalition mondiale pour
As a
vaincre
member of the
Daesh,
global
le
coalition to
Canada
defeat
condamne
Daesh
fermement
ISIS,
les attaques
Canada
qui ont eu
strongly
lieu à
condemns the
Kaboul
attacks
la
that
semaine
took place in
dernière.
Kabul last week.
Nous travaillerons avec nos alliés pour
We will work
contrer
with our
l'État
allies to counter
islamique
the Islamic
partout
State
où il opère
wherever
et
it
nous
operates,
continuerons à neutraliser la
and we will
menace.
continue to
La
neutralize
lutte
the
contre le
threat.
terrorisme demeurera une
The fight
priorité et
against
le Canada
terrorism
continuera de
remains a
travailler avec
priority,
ses partenaires
and Canada
pour
will continue
l'empêcher,
to work
pour
with its
empêcher
partners
que l'Afghanistan ne
to prevent
devienne une fois de
Afghanistan
plus un
from
refuge pour
once
le
again
terrorisme
becoming a haven for
transnational.
transnational terrorism.
Merci.
Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le ministre. On
Thank
passera
you, Minister.
maintenant à la période des questions. We'll now
We will
move
now
to
move
press
to question
conference.
periods.
We'll start with the first question from the phone. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile maintenant pour poser une question. There will be a brief pause while participants register for questions. Il y aura un court délai vous permettant de vous enregistrer dans la file d'attente pour la période de questions. We thank you for your patience. Merci de patienter. Our first question is from Lisa Laflamme from CTV National News. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Yes, good morning, ministers. Thank you for taking our questions. I just want to get some clarity, if I can, on the visa document that the Afghan families received, identifying them as Canadian citizens very clearly. You said last Friday and again this morning that those documents are valid, and yet late last night, new information went out, an update from the government suggesting that that document, the facilitation letter for travel, is no longer valid, no longer serves a purpose. I'm quoting the document. So can you clear up the confusion now? Is that document, the original document they received, the facilitation letter, valid?
Well, thank you very much for the question, Lisa. It's an important one, and I just want to again underline, we know how difficult and distressing a time this is for those who remain in Afghanistan who are wishing to resettle to Canada, and we are going to continue to pull out all of the stops that are necessary to get them here. And that includes issuing documents that clearly communicate that they are permitted to travel to Canada. As you know, the goalposts have been moved a number of times by the Taliban. And what we are doing is we are taking the best available information that we can get from the ground, as well as our interlocutors and partners in the region, so that we can quickly and with great agility express that language in clear terms. And so right now what we are doing is we have issued emergency visas, which do that they are to be allowed safe passage, and we will continue to issue those documents as quickly as we possibly can so that they can be permitted past the checkpoints onto their flights and be allowed to transit.
Is that document that they have already valid, or do they now have to go back into the system and reapply? It's still not clear to me.
Well, first of all, I would encourage them all to keep possession of all of the documents that they've been issued from the Government of Canada, including from my colleague, Minister Garneau's department, which is one of the documents that I know that has, in some instances, facilitated safe passage through to a third country in Canada. But we are going to be very quick in responding to developments that are on the ground, because ultimately what we are solving for right now is to communicate in clear and strong language that these Afghan nationals should be permitted safe passage through to a third country for the purposes of resettling Canada. And we will remain very quick and efficient in adjusting that language where necessary. But I want to also add that assurances that we have received in response to the international community clearly setting out expectations that Afghan nationals be permitted safe passage to travel to their final destination is an encouraging development. And right now we are going to channel that development in a way that will allow us to issue visas in whatever form that is necessary to get them through checkpoints, get them onto flights or across international borders so that they can resettle to Canada as quickly as possible.
We'll now go to the next question. Operator.
Thank you. Our next question is from Lee Bertium from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Yes, thank you. I might double or possibly triple barrel this question. There's a lot to ask here. I wanted to start by asking how many people have been approved for special visas or through the SIM program, but remain in Afghanistan, as far as you know. What are you going to do about those people? Should they start making their way to Pakistan? And you mentioned watching the Taliban's actions, not its words. What about Pakistan? There's been word that they are preventing or do not want more refugees to come in. So, sorry, a lot there, I realize, but just wanted to cover it all.
Yeah, you did pack a little bit into the question, but I'm going to do my best to answer it, Lee. So first and foremost, as you've heard, we have evacuated roughly 3,700 out of Afghanistan, the majority of whom are Afghan refugees and nationals who will be resettled under our special immigration measures. We believe that number will reach slightly over 2,000. Some are remaining in transit, and we are working very closely with our international partners to locate Afghan refugees and nationals whom they have helped to evacuate. And again, today's announcement is another important step in our coordination with the United States to further accelerate the work of identifying Afghan refugees in alignment with the priorities which are enumerated in our humanitarian resettlement program, which again was the first of its kind around the world, and that was launched by Canada. The numbers are fluid, and we are going to continue to process as many applications as possible. When we launched the Special Immigration Measures Program, we did it with a view to being as inclusive as we could, not only of interpreters, as was the case the last time that there was a similar approach about 10 years ago, but other fixers, including those who have supported human rights, including those who work in the media, including those who support journalists. So our main objective now is to continue to process those applications, and we are working around the clock, not only to process those applications, but to ensure that they have the documents that are necessary to cross checkpoints, board flights cross international borders so that they can get to Canada, and we're not going to stop.
And so let me add a couple of things to that, if I may. I would like to say that at the moment, our advice to Canadians and Canadian permanent residents in Afghanistan and vulnerable Afghans is to stay put, because the situation at this point is uncertain. And as we have described, we're trying very hard to get the Taliban to agree to allow people to leave safely. And obviously, we're also working on trying to get the airport open again. So that is our advice to Canadians at this uncertain transition time at this particular moment. Of course, we can't prevent any personal decisions that may be made by people on the ground in Kabul. And should they make a decision that they wish to go overland and try to get into another country, we have at the moment an undertaking to be in contact with the countries that are neighboring to Afghanistan. I have a call, for example, scheduled to speak with Pakistan to facilitate their entry should they go there. At the moment, the situation at the Pakistan border changes on a regular basis. It's important to know that. And sometimes certain points are open and other points are closed. So we are going to be talking with Pakistan to tell them that if anybody does arrive at that border or other neighboring countries, we would like them to facilitate their entry. And of course, our embassies and consulates are waiting to process them to get them onto Canada.
Thank you. And a follow-up, excuse me, you said, this question is in particular for Minister Mendicino. You said you were pulling out all the stops, but what do you admit your government and IRCC did not put enough resources and urgency into addressing this crisis after the July 23rd announcement? And if you don't agree, or if you won't say that, how do you respond to repeated complaints about the slow processing of applications by our IRCC, apparently because only a handful of staff were assigned, and about the lack of response from IRCC to applications that has left many Afghans in limbo?
Right from the get-go, we've mobilized our entire global network to make this our number one priority. We put additional resources on the front lines. We have support from other branches within government to stand up the hotline, which, as I said, is now operating at extended hours. We've more than doubled our capacity on that particular channel. Very few dropped calls, low wait times. You heard the thousands of emails that we have responded to. And critically, and most importantly, we are processing applications at an unprecedented clip. And as a result of that, you now hear of stories, and you've seen videos of those Afghan nationals who have their documents in possession, and they have been able to get out of Afghanistan. And you've seen now the positive and very encouraging results of that, with ongoing flights arriving in Canada, and those Afghan refugees are completing their quarantines and putting down roots in their communities. The central challenge has always been the violence and the volatility on the ground in Kabul. And our commitment is that now, even after the coalition withdrawal has been completed, that we will continue to process those applications, that we will continue to express in clear and strong language that they should be permitted safe passage so they can resettle to Canada, to continue to work our international partners around Afghanistan so that we can receive Afghan refugees who are making their way to those locations, and to lead by implementing our humanitarian resettlement program. And today's announcement marks an important milestone with an engagement and an agreement with the United States to commence in earnest the prioritization of those Afghan refugees that will fall within the parameters of our program. And we are going to continue to exhaust every effort until we get this work done.
Thank you, Minister. Maintenant aux prochaines questions.
Thank you. Merci. Once again, please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. De nouveau, appuyez sur étoile maintenant pour poser une question. Our next question is from Robert Fife from the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Hi, Minister of Immigration. I want to come back to what Lisa had asked you. We're hearing from people that the facilitation letters that were stamped and verified by the Canadian government for Afghan people going to the airport no longer serves a purpose. people have been getting letters yesterday and today saying that the facilitation letter for travel to Ahmed Karzai Airport was issued to you to help you and your family navigate checkpoints only during the period of the Canadian evacuation flights out of Kabul. As the Canadian evacuation flights have ended and no future flights are planned at this time, the facilitation letter no longer serves a purpose. So what's going to happen to these people? I mean, they thought they're coming to Canada, now you're saying they can't come.
Well, Bob, as you know, again, the Taliban have been moving the goalposts on what is expected at those checkpoints, and we want to be absolutely clear and agile that they have whatever language and documentation that is necessary. So that is what we're solving for right now. We are solving to be sure that the documents that we issue them will work at those checkpoints and will allow them to board. We are getting that intel in real time, and we are responding very quickly. I'll just underline that. We are responding very quickly to ensure that the language that is contained in government documentation is expressed in the clearest and strongest of terms so that those who are traveling under our immigration programs are granted safe passage so that they can get to Canada as quickly as possible. The earlier document that was issued to them, the laissez-passer, the emergency visas, as you also heard, had worked in some instances. So that was encouraging. But in other instances and in other cases, it was not. So as we continue to get the intel on the ground in real time, we are responding very quickly to ensure that the language is successful in granting safe passage to Afghan nationals who are transiting to Canada under our humanitarian and immigration pathways.
Well, first of all, you haven't answered the question about how these people are going to get out, given the fact that they had letters and the government is now saying they can't have the letters. But I have another question to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Garneau, can you tell us how many Canadian nationals and permanent residents are now in Afghanistan? You must have a number now because they would have registered with the Canadian government.
Yes, we do, Bob. In fact, we now have that number because the main thing that we needed to figure out was how many Canadian nationals or permanent residents and family members were able to get out on some of our allies' flights. And now that we have had a chance to look at the manifests from those other countries, we estimate that at the moment there are roughly 1,250 either Canadian citizens, permanent residents, or family members that are in Afghanistan.
Thanks, Bob. I'll now go to the next question. Operator, are there any more questions?
And once again, please press star 1 if you have a question. Veuillez appuyer sur l'étoile 1 maintenant si vous avez une question. And so we have no further questions registered at this time. Nous n'avons plus de questions pour le moment. Back to you, Mr. Cohen. À vous la parole.
Thank you. With no more questions, we will conclude the press conference now. Merci, à la conférence de presse. Merci tout le monde.